Hello everybody. I have a real mess going on my table here, so I'm going to push things aside before I actually tip the camera down, because what I was doing last night was I threw all of my feet, all of my attachments and everything on the table, trying to make sense and organize it so I know where what is, because it can be overwhelming sometimes. And I came across my collection of rufflers. You know, these little things. And I know they can be really, really intimidating. And I haven't used one in quite some time. And I have some little Easter bonnet kind of projects going on. And I was thinking that this would be a good time to explain these, because just about everyone who has sewing stuff has one of these stashed somewhere. And usually it's kept because you don't want to get rid of it, but you don't actually use it. And they're amazing little tools. So let me tip the camera down. We're going to go through what these things are, how to use them, and work through a couple examples so you can see what I mean. So the first thing I want to say is, if you have any of these little books, or you can get your hands on one, even if it's not specifically for the machine you have, in general, they have extremely good directions and illustrations on how to use all of these archaic tools that we just have kind of forgotten, you know. They're fabulous. So anyway, this is the 201, this is the 66, I've got other ones somewhere else. And they're all, the thing is that these are all slightly different, but they operate the same, okay? So like this is the one that was made for the 201, but honestly it'll fit any low shank machine. And the main difference that I see is this little lever is different, okay? This is one that is, this is the most basic one. This is the next step up. This one, I don't even know if it's an official Singer one, but it is like the super deluxe, all the bells and whistles one, okay? And there's different components, but they all have a feeding mechanism down here so that you can get your fabric in there. Let me cut a few pieces of paper here so you can see what I mean. They're actually amazing. What you can do is gather, you can ruffle, you can do that while you're sewing it onto your permanent fabric, and you can ruffle or gather while you're sewing it onto your fabric, while you're putting a piece of piping on top of it and a facing piece on top of that. You know, they're amazing. Now, the first thing I would do, if you find one in your stash or somewhere, is oil it. Okay, make sure that you have the rust taken care of. This one had quite a bit of rust actually, so I spent some time with a little wire brush and penetrating oil and got that cleaned up. But up here in the gears, you want to put a drop of oil right here. There's a little hinge area in the very front here. That you want, basically all of the parts that move, if you can seesaw it back and forth and see everything that moves. There's also a slider right here. On this one, it's right here. And that needs to be able to slide back and forth nice and smoothly. So you might want to put a drop of oil in there and just work it, you know. Once your little mechanism is working pretty well, and then we can go ahead and play with it on the machine. But before I put it on the machine, let me explain a few parts. Up here at the very top, there's a little slot that has different holes in it. This one only has a 1, a star, 1 star, and 3. This one has 1, 6, 12, and star. This one has 1, 12, 6. So 0, 12, 6, and 1. 0 and star is the same. What that means is you're disengaging it and the mechanism is not going to make any ruffles, any gathers, okay? So when you put this thing up onto star, On this one, star is the very center portion where there is no slot. And on this one, star has its own little slot, okay? Then, if you want to gather, and gathering means that it's going to make a little tuck every single stitch. So that's what these numbers mean. The number 1 means every stitch the mechanism is moving, okay? And that is for gathering. So on all these, they have a 1. If you're going to be making pleats, you're going to want to space it out a little bit more. The gathering is meant to be with a very small amount of movement here so that you don't have a huge chunk when you're gathering. It's meant to be just adding a little bit each stitch. For a pleat, this one only goes up to 3, you know, so it's a little more limited, but it will work. That means you're making a little tuck every 3rd stitch. On here, it has 6 is the recommended. In all the books that I have been reading, 6 is the recommended stitch length. And I want to show you, well, I grabbed my fabric and I was just playing and troubleshooting and everything like that. But if you can see here, this is 1 tuck per inch. And that's with a pretty substantial, it's about, a little less than 1/8 of an inch per tuck. So that's a pretty substantial gather there, okay? And then I was playing with other things, and I think this was spreading it out to every 6 inches, but still with the same small amount of movement. And then, you know, just playing with different things. And that's the whole process of this is once you figure out how your individual mechanism works, I would suggest just getting some fabric, tearing it into strips a couple inches wide, and playing. So that takes care of this. If you're going to be making pleats, I would suggest either the 12 will be wider spaced. That's one pleat every 12 stitches. 6 is the recommended 1 tuck every 6 stitches, okay? Then there's a little screw up here. This one is there, this one is here, this one is here. They're all very similar. The farther down the screw is turned, the longer or the deeper your tuck will be, okay? So if this is down all the way, what it does is when you make a stitch, this little screw pushes this whole mechanism out. And so that is its biggest extent it can go, which is really pretty deep there. So if you're doing gathers and you only want a small amount moved every single stitch, where you have it set at 1 tuck per stitch, and you just want a little bit, see how I just barely have a little bit peeking out from underneath there, so that then when this pushes it, I just have a little bit of movement. It's kind of hard to do it right here. Let me see. So on this one, it's the same. They all operate basically the same. Down all the way is the longest, up all the way is the shortest. This one is different, like I said, because it has this little cover that comes off of this finger, and when you're going to do pleating, they want you to push it over it. When they want you to do gathers, they want you to take it off, and this just basically changes the height of this finger. And on the bottom, when you're going to be feeding your fabric in, I'm just going to go through just basic ruffling a fabric while you're sewing it to another one. I'm not going to go into all of the other options. If you want to get into, you know, adding piping, adding a facing, adding all those other things, highly suggested you grab one of these, you know, off of eBay or in someone's cabinet or something, you know. But anyway, on the bottom of these, there's this little feed mechanism that looks like that. And that is the same on just about everybody here, okay? The bottom piece that you're going to be making like your base fabric that you want to add a ruffle to, it needs to set at the very bottom like this, okay? So that it comes through this top part here and lays on the bottom. The piece that you want to ruffle, I'll put that in separately, also comes in here, but it comes back up, so there's only like that one little finger holding it in place. Okay, this little finger. And then it goes between the blades. You have two blades that are going to be moving against each other. And if it feels like it's really stiff when you're trying to load it in, this is a flexible blade, so you can, let me see if I can do this here. You can lift it gently and put your fabric in. What I found though is that I could just kind of, it's hard with a paper towel, but I could just kind of pull it in and it'll set itself in there, okay? So if this is the way that the one that's going to be ruffled is fed, all right? On top of this blade, underneath this blade, so it's right in the middle of those two blades, and wrapped around this finger, okay? So I put that there, put the fabric that I'm going to sew it on, just coming like this, and it's across the very bottom at the bottom of the blade, so that this fabric is going up against the feed dogs, okay? So it's going to sit like this in the machine. Actually, no, it's not. It's going to sit like this in the machine. This part is what hooks onto your presser bar, and this that has a little claw kind of hook, that is what goes around the screw mechanism on your needle bar. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and put this onto one of my machines, grab some strips of fabric and start playing. And like I said, what I would suggest is that you do that because every one of these is slightly different. So by playing with different settings of your screw, which again changes the depth of each individual tuck, by playing with different options here and different options of how many stitches or how many tucks per how many stitches, you'll be able to play with it and see, okay, for a hypothetical 10-inch piece of fabric, I need a strip that is 20 inches long to make enough tucks using this ratio. You know, that's a play with it kind of thing. But I'm gonna use the Super Deluxe here. Now on this one, it's got these extra pieces here, which is again for adding extra piping, extra trim, and everything like that. Same here. These up here are for adding a facing and piping, which I am not getting into today because that would be even more confusing. But those definitely have a purpose. You know, I'm just not going to do it right now. Okay, so like I said, I think I said, the only rufflers I have are low shank ones. So I'm going to be using my 15 for this. And the way I put this on is I need to make sure my needle is up all the way, unscrew that little thumb screw, get it out of the way. This little screw right here, that is the part that this is going to go around, okay? So let's see if I can do this with the camera in my way. I'm just kind of putting that claw around it. It's pretty big, so you got a lot of leeway. And then anchoring this little bracket onto my presser bar and putting the screw back on. Okay, I am going to set this for gathering, which is 1 tuck per inch with a very, very low or small amount of gathering, okay? I've got my bobbin is black and my needle thread is is like lilac color, so they're very different, and I'm using a light blue fabric here. Now I can tell you that the hardest part in this is going to be getting everything set up. And so what I would suggest is for about the first several inches, like 5 or 6 inches of your strips of fabric or whatever you're doing, starch it just so that it has a little bit of body when you're trying to feed it through these things here. So I'm going to put my needle down and up so that it can catch the bobbin, and I'm going to pull the needle and bobbin thread out the bottom. I want them both to be coming down below all of this, okay? So basically the bobbin thread is down here, the needle thread is out here. When I pull it, they're both coming back. And when you first get started, you're going to want to hang on to those 2 threads, because if they get sucked into this, it's kind of a nightmare. Okay, so let's put the blue fabric on first, which is going to go over the top, underneath everything else, and just kind of come out the back side. Just got about 3/8 of an inch or so of fabric down there. Now, this is the one I'm going to ruffle. So lifting my presser foot, putting it over that little toe that I showed you while it was on my desk, and pulling it carefully, pulling the red fabric so it's going to cinch up between those 2 blades, okay? Once I get it there, I'm going to tug my little blue fabric so that they are both starting at about the same place. And you're going to want enough back here that it's not going to get sucked in or anything. Okay, how does that look? Looks good. I have it set on 1 tuck per inch, and I'm actually going to make them large tucks, so I'm going to let the little tip of my screw peek out a little bit. Again, it seems kind of arbitrary, but play with it as you go. I'm going to grab my little bobbin and needle thread just to make sure they don't go anywhere. And basically I am holding on to the bottom one, but the top is looser. So I'm like putting my I'm trying to hold the bottom one firmer, and the top one is just, it can move as it wants to. Okay, so you can see it's making an adorable little ruffle here. So when I turn it over, I have a nice full ruffle. I'm going to change it to a pleat. So I'm going to lift up this little lever and put it to the number 6, okay? Then I'm going to make this screw go a lot deeper. And come up here and continue to sew. Okay, so did you see how it like really grabbed it in every six stitches there? So here is the difference. These are 1 pleat every 6 stitches, but they're fairly deep. These are my gathers, 1 every inch, but they're not that deep. And you have full play to adjust anything the way you want. So another way that you can get everything set up that might be easier for you is to get it all set up on your mechanism first and then attach that to the machine. So let's say on this one, the blue is the part that I'm going to be ruffling. Just pulling some of my threads off here. I'm going to go ahead and feed it through the little feed guide, as it should. And this is the one that gets pulled through the 2 blades. So it's in the middle of those 2 blades. Okay. So if you can see, if I see the teeth, okay. Can you see these teeth here? And there's fabric underneath it. And if you flip it over this way, you see a bottom blade. Okay, this is in the right position here to be ruffled. So then once that is in place, the one I'm going to be sewing it onto goes, turn it this way here, underneath this same feed mechanism right there, and then just lays flat. Okay, so this is how it looks for the one that you're sewing onto. So if I can just keep it nice and behaving itself, then I can attach this to my machine. So what I need to do is raise this up, this part that has the little claw, and hook that around this post first, and then anchor this on my presser foot, or my presser bar. So putting the claw around that, putting the little bracket on my presser bar, and tightening the thumb screw. That might be easier for you. So right now I have it set on 6 with a pretty deep ruffle. Just to see what happens, I'm going to move it over to 12 and leave the ruffle length. Actually, I'm going to take the ruffler and screw this screw down all the way to get the deepest ruffle this thing can make. Okay, so from layering all this ahead of time and then just clipping this mechanism on, it's very important that you get your needle thread underneath all of this stuff. Okay, so I'm pulling it under so that it is going through here. I hope you can see that. It's coming around and underneath here. So now I can get a hold of my needle thread and my bobbin thread. And from behind, if I give them both a gentle tug, I can tell everything is working right. So now with my presser foot down, I am just going to turn this by hand so we can watch it really slowly. I have it set on a stitch every 12 inches. And there it goes. And there it goes. Okay, so now that we've seen it slow, I'm going to go ahead and hit the foot pedal and watch her go. I lost my needle. Well, if I had my needle screwed in better, you know, we would see that, but my needle just fell out, so that's my bad for not screwing it in well enough. And this is what it looks like. And you saw, you know, it's very regimented. It does what it's supposed to do. Just getting it set up requires patience. If it was me, I would set aside an entire evening or afternoon just to play with this with absolutely no intention of it going perfectly the first dozen times. You know, a lot of times understanding the older pieces and everything, it's just a lot of figuring out the life of them. You know, they have every single piece has a purpose, you know, so figuring out how they all work together, figuring out how to feed things through, figuring out how to hold them so they don't want to come out, you know, but it's one of those things, it's a motor function thing that once you get it, they're going to be so much fun and you're going to want to use it all the time. But you got to kind of pace yourself and work through that learning curve so that you don't get too frustrated and burnt out. And I think that that's what happens is a lot of people find these and they try it once and it goes badly because there's so many pieces. There's enough things in here that you need to learn. It's like learning how to use a sewing machine all over again, just in this piece. That they just put in the back of the drawer and leave it away. But I think it's fun. I'm going to try to use this on a future project. So I hope that was helpful, you know, and I will talk to you again soon.